Good day everyone, my name is Sandrea Maynard. I am the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Global Affairs at the University of the West Indies and the President of the International School for Development Justice. It's my pleasure to speak here today around AI governance, a Caribbean regional imperative. Now, when we consider Caribbean AI governance, it is essential, not optional. When we consider that AI is reshaping the world economies through automation, data analytics, and intelligent systems that enhance productivity across sectors. For the Caribbean, this transformation occurs within a unique context of being small island developing states with limited resources, high connectivity costs, and economies heavily dependent on tourism, agriculture, and services. Now, this is not to the exclusion of other small island developing states, but the Caribbean region faces a real digital divide paradox. Whilst Caribbean nations have relatively high internet penetration rates, they often lack a robust digital infrastructure. They often lack technical expertise and, more importantly, capital investment necessarily to fully harness AI's potential. Now, this creates both vulnerability and disruption to potential opportunities, and thus leads to leapfrogging traditional development stages. Now, globally, AI is raising fundamental questions about things such as privacy, ethics, labour, equity, and security. Now, these challenges are not unique to any one nation. They are shared, borderless, and deeply interconnected. Now, for the Caribbean region, this means that adopting fragmented, country-by-country approaches is insufficient. What is required is a regional governance framework aligned with international standards, yet responsive to our unique realities. Now, the region requires a comprehensive, coordinated governance framework that, along with harmonising with international standards, it does address the Caribbean's distinct circumstances and development priorities. Now, what do we mean by this? And I'll address that in a moment, but just to say that Caribbean AI governance isn't merely advisable, it is absolutely essential for regional prosperity and security in the digital age. Now, why is this important? It's important to the region, but we must also consider a number of factors as to why it's important in AI's development. First of all, cultural and linguistic erasure. Contemporary AI systems fail to often accommodate these linguistic and cultural nuances, increasing the risk of misrepresentation or misinterpretations in the Caribbean context, potentially leading to things such as classification of errors and compromised safety mechanism. Let's take, for example, the region's Creole languages and post-colonial cultural heritage. They are largely excluded from mainstream AI developments due to lack of representative data sets and formal documentation. A second factor that needs to be considered as to the importance of this: AI and its governance is dominated predominantly by wealthy nations and their priorities. So, for example, you will attend a AI safety summit. They often create localized definitions and standards of safety that are heavily influenced by wealthier nations with significant computational and data resources. So major frameworks, for example, like the EU's AI Act, US legislation, and Australian guidelines focus on concerns relevant to developed economies whilst overlooking the specific realities of smaller Caribbean nations. The third factor to consider really here is data sovereignty and looking at further exploitation concerns. Now, control over ethical use of locally sourced data does not often rest with Caribbean institutions, but rather lies in the hands of external multinational companies and corporations, research labs, or governments with limited accountability to local populations. Now, this creates a dynamic where Caribbean nations become passive data providers, whilst decision-making power remains abroad. Our fourth factor to be considered here is economic vulnerability and infrastructure challenges. Now, the Caribbean faces unique economic risks from AI automation, particularly in sectors like tourism and business processes. Let's take, for example, outsourcing. We have a situation where many workers within the region work in tourism and business process centres. We now have AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants who could replace human customer service agents in call centres, leading to significant job losses and, of course, economic instability in a critical employment sector. Now, within the Caribbean region, the infrastructure limitations often compound these challenges. So we have things like unstable internet connectivity, power outages, and climate vulnerabilities disadvantage the region in AI development, whilst making it difficult to implement sovereign AI solutions. Now, in exploring a little bit more about the sort of research or resource, should I say, constraints for AI development, Caribbean institutes may struggle to acquire and maintain the necessary infrastructure for competitive AI development. So when we consider advanced computing hardware, looking at the global shortages we're facing, looking at export controls, the region is vulnerable to natural disasters, which makes it very risky to divert energy and water resources to power intensive AI systems. Another area that is really of significance is looking at the brain drain. And on the other side, what capacity building opportunities there are. And I will look at the two of them. Currently, AI governance frameworks don't really adequately address talent retention. In the absence of adequate mechanisms such as competitive opportunities, robust research infrastructure, and favourable policies, environments, talented professionals may migrate to regions offering better incentives and resources. So that's going to reduce our capacity building within the region significantly. Not something that is alien to this region. We also have to consider the lack of representation in global governance currently. One of the fundamental issues here is that Caribbean voices are systematically excluded from AI governance discussions, particularly around policies, because they don't often account for the region's specific vulnerabilities, cultural context, and development needs. It's as though AI is being constructed for the masses without really taking into consideration those cultural nuances. And that's not just applicable to the Caribbean, that's applicable to acknowledging those cultural nuances across the globe that may belong to other smaller nations. Now, what that in fact does is this is a situation where global AI frameworks perpetuate rather than address existing inequalities. Now, research suggests that a truly inclusive AI governance and governance framework would need to actively incorporate Caribbean perspectives, support low resource language development, ensure data sovereignty, and create adaptive frameworks that address the unique economic and environmental challenges facing small island developing states. So let us take a look at the global AI governance landscape, and let's look at what frameworks have really been developed. Now, the international community has really made significant strides in this area. For example, in August of this year, the UN established new bodies through a General Assembly resolution in August of 2025, which was unanimously endorsed by all member states, to close the dangerous void in AI governance. And what they wanted to try and attempt to do is to make a coordinated global effort to close those governance gaps in AI. However, those frameworks often overlook the unique challenges facing smaller regions. The absence of representative data sets and the dominance of external entities in data collection can impact local sovereignty and cultural preservation. Now, this really reinforces and highlights why a regional approach is essential. But it's not all doom and gloom. The Caribbean has certainly responded. Now, as part of the Caribbean regional response, they have acknowledged the rapid evolution of AI, and also have considered both the centralised international efforts and the regional initiatives, and have looked at how we can now tailor those specific needs to the Caribbean. So the Caribbean region really does exemplify how smaller economies taking those proactive steps to ensure that they have a voice in this AI transformation is a valid and a strong voice that can actually allow them to emerge as leaders in the AI coordination. And those give a support to other nations looking, or other smaller nations looking to implement their own AI governance. So, not taken in any particular order, we have first of all the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, which was launched. They launched an AI task force in July of 2025, and they have that strategic initiative to coordinate AI development and governance across the region. Now, the CTU launched with a view to guiding ethical and inclusive artificial intelligence development in the region. Now, the task force really focuses on what they say as 4 critical objectives. First of all, harmonising AI policies and regulational frameworks across Caribbean countries, building regional AI capacity and talent, especially for young persons and unrepresented communities, promoting ethical and responsible AI-aligned policies with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and fostering cross-sector collaboration between governments, academia, private sector and civil society. Now, the Caribbean has also demonstrated world leadership and innovation, with, for example, Trinidad and Tobago recently appointing the first world AI minister, which places the country in a rare company. So this demonstrates a new era for Caribbean nations, with their pioneering governance structures that recognises AI as a fundamental to modern administration. We also had the policy framework development by UNESCO, and they created the AI policy roadmap for the Caribbean, which based on the global standard. It was adopted by over 193 member states, and that roadmap involved significant research and the inclusion of over 1,000 institutions and individuals from 20 Caribbean countries. So they did ensure that there was a broad regional input. We also have the World Digital Governance, WDG. Now this isn't just another framework. It is and meant to be the Caribbean's own response rooted in ethical AI governance and piloted here in Jamaica. Crucially, what it does do is it prioritizes data ownership by citizens, so people of the Caribbean are not just data sources but decision makers. And more importantly than just a policy, it is really about building jobs, skills, and the digital infrastructure our region needs to thrive in this new arena. And if the world is asking how small states can lead, the answer is clear. And WDG has said through their World Digital Governance, the Caribbean is not waiting to be governed, they are shaping governance, safeguarding their data and creating the jobs of the AI era. So when we consider why regional approaches matter, we have looked at how the Caribbean's approach addresses several critical needs that global frameworks overlook, such as cultural and linguistic diversity. Caribbean nations span multiple languages and cultural traditions that require a localized approach to AI applications and governance. Small island developing states need coordinated approaches to build sufficient scale for AI development and regulations. We are sovereign states across the region, but we cannot do this alone. It is imperative that there is a regional governance policy that, as I've already discussed, that really lends itself to the international standards. We need to look at how to better align AI development with specific Caribbean developments, such as climate resilience, tourism, sustainability, and economic diversification. And never to forget digital sovereignty. Regional coordination helps smaller nations maintain greater control over their data and AI development paths, rather than being dependent on external frameworks and having to try to adapt and adopt them. And we don't want a situation where we are mismatched. So the message I'd like to end with is that the Caribbean's proactive regional approach to AI governance demonstrates how smaller economies can effectively participate in and shape global AI development whilst preserving their unique interests and values. Now, this model offers valuable lessons for other regions seeking to balance global integration with local priorities in AI governance. So thank you all for listening.